The chamber was packed. The buzz in Congress wasn't about a new bill or a heated debate, but about a lawsuit that had shaken Washington to its core. Karoline Leavitt, standing at the podium, nervously adjusted her papers. Her voice cracked as she pleaded for Jasmine Crockett to end the $100 million lawsuit that had the entire political class rattled. Leavitt's tone grew desperate. She painted herself as the victim, insisting the case was politically motivated and damaging to the integrity of Congress. Her words echoed in the chamber, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. Lawmakers leaned forward, eager to see what would come next. Then, Jasmine Crockett rose. Calm, poised, and with a sharpness in her eyes that silenced the entire room, she walked slowly toward the microphone. She didn't need notes. She didn't need rehearsed lines. "Congresswoman Leavitt," Crockett began, her voice steady and cutting through the silence, "your plea is not about the truth. It's about saving face. You think begging in this chamber will erase the evidence, the misconduct, and the consequences. But this body is not your shield. The law is not a stage for theatrics. And I will not allow your cries to cover the facts." The air grew heavier. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment as Leavitt's expression shifted from defiance to panic. Crockett pressed forward. "You call this lawsuit political. I call it accountability. You wanted power without responsibility, spotlight without scrutiny. But today, you stand before Congress not as a leader, but as someone who finally has to answer for their own actions." The chamber erupted in gasps. Lawmakers exchanged looks of disbelief as Crockett's words reverberated. Some covered their mouths in shock, others shook their heads, stunned by the sheer bluntness of her response. Leavitt tried to interject, stammering, but Crockett lifted her hand slightly, not to silence her opponent, but to make it clear she hadn't finished. "Your plea," Crockett declared, her voice rising just enough to command the room, "is nothing more than an attempt to escape justice. This lawsuit isn't going anywhere. The people deserve answers. And Congress will not be used as your shield against the truth." With that, she stepped back. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure if they were witnessing a speech or a historic takedown. Leavitt lowered her gaze. The plea that was supposed to win sympathy had instead become the most humiliating moment of her career. And Congress, left in utter shock, knew they had just witnessed a moment that would be replayed across every screen in America. The moment Jasmine Crockett sat back down, the chamber didn't just stay silent, it froze. The tension was thick enough to slice through. Reporters in the gallery scrambled to type every word, while lawmakers whispered to one another in disbelief. Karoline Leavitt, visibly shaken, clutched the edges of the podium. Her carefully crafted plea, meant to sway hearts and restore her image, had just been shredded before the entire nation. She tried to regain composure, forcing a smile, but her voice betrayed her nerves. "Congresswoman Crockett," she stammered, "this lawsuit isn't just about me. It's about our democracy, it's about keeping politics from turning into vendettas." But Crockett didn't even flinch. She folded her arms, her eyes fixed on Leavitt with the kind of calm confidence that said, "Try all you want, you won't recover from this." Whispers grew louder among the lawmakers seated nearby. Some leaned back, shaking their heads as if they'd just watched a rookie step into the ring with a heavyweight champion. Others leaned in, hungry to see how Crockett would respond if Leavitt dared to push further. The Speaker of the House tapped the gavel once, calling for order, but even that couldn't stop the simmering chaos. Cameras zoomed tighter. The whole country was watching as one political career teetered on the edge of collapse. Karoline Leavitt's hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone, trying to steady her voice. The humiliation from Crockett's words lingered in the air like smoke, and every lawmaker could feel it. She leaned forward, forcing herself to sound confident. "This lawsuit," she said, her tone faltering between anger and desperation, "is nothing but a distraction from the real issues facing Americans. People don't care about petty accusations, they care about jobs, inflation, and security. This is theater." Her words echoed, but instead of applause or nods, she was met with cold stares. A few lawmakers exchanged knowing glances, while others whispered under their breath, their eyes darting between Leavitt and Crockett. Then, slowly, Jasmine Crockett rose again. The subtle sound of her chair moving was enough to draw every camera back to her. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. "Theater?" Crockett said sharply, her eyes locked on Leavitt. "What you call theater, the American people call justice. What you dismiss as petty is $100 million worth of corruption, negligence, and betrayal. Don't you dare reduce accountability to a punchline." The words cut like a blade. Lawmakers gasped audibly, and the press gallery erupted in furious typing. Leavitt's attempt to reframe the narrative had backfired instantly. She swallowed hard, but it was clear the ground beneath her was crumbling. The speaker leaned forward, watching closely, as though even they knew this was no longer a simple exchange, this was history unfolding live. Karoline Leavitt gripped the podium tighter, her knuckles white. The chamber wasn't with her, she could feel it. Every second that passed made her look smaller, weaker. She needed to strike back, and fast. So she raised her chin and forced a smirk. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, voice sharper now, "you love to grandstand. You thrive on soundbites that play well on television. But this lawsuit, this circus, will drag Congress into the mud. Is that really what you want your legacy to be? Turning this institution into a spectacle?" Her words were meant to sting, meant to put Crockett on the defensive. A few of her allies clapped lightly, trying to spark some momentum. For a brief moment, it looked like Leavitt had regained her footing. But Crockett didn't even blink. She leaned forward in her seat, her hands folded calmly on the desk. When she spoke, her voice carried like a hammer striking steel. "You speak of legacy, Congresswoman," Crockett replied, her eyes narrowing, "yet yours is already written, a record of excuses, pleas, and cover-ups. You talk about protecting this institution, but the truth is, this lawsuit exists because you dragged Congress into the mud. I'm not the one humiliating this chamber. You are." The chamber erupted, not in cheers, but in stunned gasps. Lawmakers turned toward Leavitt, some shaking their heads, others whispering that this might be the end of her credibility. Even the speaker raised their brows, clearly taken aback by the ferocity of Crockett's reply. Leavitt's smirk vanished. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the moment her confidence cracked once again. The silence that followed was crushing. Every eye in the chamber was on Karoline Leavitt, who now looked cornered, her earlier bravado slipping through her trembling lips. She shuffled her notes, pretending to regain control, but the cameras had already caught the fear in her expression. Then Jasmine Crockett stood once more. This time, she didn't rush. She moved deliberately, each step echoing in the chamber as if the entire room knew a blow was coming. She placed her hand on the podium, leaned forward slightly, and locked her gaze on Leavitt. "You talk about distractions," Crockett began slowly, her tone razor-sharp, "but the real distraction here is you. While Americans fight for affordable healthcare, fair wages, and justice, you're standing here pleading to erase your own accountability. Congress isn't shocked by this lawsuit, they're shocked by your arrogance to beg for mercy instead of owning the truth." The words landed like thunder. Some lawmakers covered their mouths in disbelief, others scribbled frantic notes, and the press gallery buzzed louder than before. Even members who usually sat stone-faced couldn't hide their astonishment. Leavitt froze, her lips parting as if she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. The gavel struck once to calm the chamber, but even the speaker knew order was slipping away. Crockett straightened, her eyes never leaving Leavitt. Then, with chilling finality, she said, "Congress will not shield you. The law will not bend for you. And history will not forgive you." The room went silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. Just the echo of Crockett's words hanging in the air like a verdict already delivered. The silence was unbearable for Karoline Leavitt. Crockett's words still hung in the air like a shadow she couldn't escape. Desperate to claw back control, Leavitt leaned toward the microphone again, her voice sharper, more emotional this time. "You sit there acting like a saint, Congresswoman Crockett," she snapped, her tone rising, "but everyone knows you thrive on chaos. You don't care about the truth, you care about headlines. You want your face on every screen, your name trending every hour. You think humiliating me will make you some kind of hero? No, it makes you reckless. And reckless leaders destroy this country." Her allies clapped louder this time, clearly instructed to save face for her, but the applause sounded thin, hollow, and forced. The rest of the chamber stayed frozen, waiting for Crockett's response. And Crockett didn't keep them waiting. She slowly rose again, the kind of rise that made the room feel heavier with each second. She didn't look angry. She looked cold. Measured. "Reckless," she said quietly at first, letting the word linger. "Reckless is pretending you can gamble away accountability. Reckless is thinking a plea for sympathy will erase $100 million of fraud. Reckless is dragging this Congress into your mess and then blaming everyone else when the spotlight burns you." Leavitt's face flushed red. She shifted uncomfortably, realizing her attack had opened a door Crockett was about to walk straight through. Crockett leaned forward slightly, her voice now sharp enough to pierce the silence. "I don't need headlines, Congresswoman. The truth doesn't need publicity. It speaks for itself. And right now, it's speaking louder than your excuses." The chamber gasped again. The speaker slammed the gavel for order, but the damage was already done. Leavitt's personal attack had backfired, and Crockett's rebuttal landed with surgical precision. Karoline Leavitt's composure finally cracked. Her voice, once carefully measured, now rose with fury as she slammed her hand against the podium. "This is outrageous," she shouted, her face flushed with anger. "You're twisting this entire chamber into a spectacle just to elevate yourself. You don't represent justice, Jasmine Crockett, you represent division. You thrive on tearing people down, and today it's me, but tomorrow it'll be someone else. How long before this whole Congress becomes your courtroom?" The outburst echoed through the chamber, shocking even her allies. A few of them clapped nervously, but the energy was fractured. Some lawmakers leaned back in their chairs, uncomfortable with the display, while others muttered under their breath. Crockett didn't move immediately. She let the silence breathe, let Leavitt's words hang in the air, almost inviting the audience to feel how desperate they were. Then, with unshakable calm, she stood. Her eyes locked on Leavitt, and her voice, quiet but cutting, filled the room. "Congresswoman, the only person tearing this chamber apart today, is you. Justice isn't division. Accountability isn't division. The only division here is between the truth and your refusal to face it." The room went still. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Leavitt's wide-eyed stare as her final defense collapsed. Crockett's calmness made the contrast sharper, one woman furious and flailing, the other collected and devastating. A veteran lawmaker leaned over to a colleague and whispered loud enough to be picked up by nearby mics, "This may be the moment her career ends." The remark rippled through the chamber like a spark on dry wood. Karoline Leavitt's breathing grew heavy as murmurs swept the chamber. The weight of Crockett's words, and that whispered remark about her career ending, pressed down on her like a vice. She gripped the podium again, but this time her voice shook as she forced out her defense. "You can mock me all you want, but I'm not the villain here," she cried, her pitch rising. "This lawsuit is a political weapon, nothing more. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone in this chamber. That's the real danger. If we normalize this, then no one is safe. Today it's me, tomorrow it could be you." Her tone wasn't commanding anymore, it was pleading, desperate. She scanned the chamber, searching for nods of agreement, for any sign of support. But most lawmakers kept their heads down, unwilling to be dragged into her spiral. Then, Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, one final time. She didn't need to shout. Her presence alone commanded silence. "You say no one is safe?" Crockett began, her voice steady as steel. "No one is safe when corruption goes unchecked. No one is safe when leaders believe they're above the law. And no one is safe when accountability is treated like an attack instead of a responsibility." The chamber froze. Crockett stepped closer to the microphone, her eyes burning into Leavitt's. "You want this lawsuit to disappear because it threatens you. But here's the truth, Congresswoman, justice doesn't vanish because you're afraid of it. Justice doesn't beg. Justice stands." The words detonated like an explosion. Gasps, whispers, even a few shouts filled the chamber as lawmakers reacted. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others scribbled furiously in their notes. The press gallery nearly shook from the frantic clatter of keyboards. Leavitt's face went pale. She looked around the room, realizing no one was rallying to her side. Her plea had collapsed, her defense shredded, and her political armor stripped away in front of the entire nation. Congress was left in shock. The gavel struck hard, but it barely made a dent in the chaos. The chamber buzzed like a hive, lawmakers whispering, reporters leaning over the balcony rails, cameras flashing in every direction. The atmosphere was electric, as if history had just taken a sharp turn in real time. Karoline Leavitt stood frozen at the podium. The same colleagues who had clapped for her earlier now avoided eye contact, shuffling papers, or staring at the floor. Even her closest allies sat stone-faced, unwilling to attach themselves to a sinking ship. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett sat calmly, her expression unreadable. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply adjusted her papers, as though dismantling Leavitt on the floor of Congress was just another day's work. That calmness made her presence even more powerful. Within minutes, staffers' phones began to buzz. Clips of the exchange had already hit social media. The hashtags were trending, hashtag Crockett destroys, hashtag Congress in shock, and hashtag Leavitt exposed. Commentators rushed to their studios, pundits on both sides of the aisle braced for the storm. One lawmaker leaned over and whispered to a colleague, "She didn't just end the plea. She may have ended Leavitt's career." The colleague nodded gravely, their eyes locked on Leavitt, who was still fumbling with her notes, as if rewriting history on paper could erase what millions were now watching online. The speaker called for order again, but the chamber couldn't settle. The feeling was too heavy, the fallout too real. Everyone knew this wasn't just a debate, it was a public undoing, and the entire country was watching it unfold live. Karoline Leavitt could no longer steady her hands. Her notes slipped slightly from the podium as she tried to regain her composure, but the chamber's eyes burned into her like spotlights she couldn't escape. She cleared her throat, forcing one last attempt to salvage her dignity. "If this chamber believes humiliation is justice," she said, her voice quivering, "then perhaps I don't belong here. But I will not stand here to be ridiculed any longer." She pushed her papers aside and stepped back from the microphone, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she turned to leave the podium. A hush fell across the chamber, the kind of silence that meant everyone knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. But before she could take another step, Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, her voice firm enough to stop Leavitt in her tracks. "Leaving won't save you," Crockett said, her tone low but commanding. "Walking away doesn't erase the truth. It only proves what the American people already see, that when confronted with accountability, you run." The chamber erupted again. Some lawmakers gasped, others shook their heads in disbelief at the brutal finality of Crockett's words. The speaker's gavel pounded repeatedly, but no one could look away from the unfolding scene. Leavitt froze mid-step. The cameras captured the image perfectly, a woman caught between escape and exposure, while her opponent stood tall, unmoved, and unshaken. The moment was seared into history. Karoline Leavitt stood frozen, her back half turned to the chamber. She knew she couldn't just walk away, that image would haunt her forever. So, trembling, she turned back to the microphone, forcing a brittle smile as cameras zoomed in. You can frame me as a coward if you want, she said, her voice cracking, but this isn't running. This is standing against persecution. I'm being targeted because of who I am and what I stand for. If I'm silenced today, then tomorrow it could be any one of you. Her words rang out, desperate to ignite sympathy. A few scattered claps came from her corner, but the sound was weak, drowned by the weight of what had already transpired. Jasmine Crockett didn't even rise this time. From her seat, she leaned forward, her tone calm but devastatingly sharp. Persecution, she echoed, her voice carrying across the chamber. Persecution is when the innocent suffer for crimes they never committed. What you're facing is consequence. And the